right, good afternoon, everyone. This is the Public Works and Finance Committee meeting of the Moscow City Council. It is the 28th of September. To my left is Councilor Sandra Kelly, and to my far left is Councilor Brandy Sullivan. I am Gina Terusio. Our first item is the approval of September 14th, 2020 Public Works and Finance Committee meeting minutes.
They look just right to me.
I agree.
I did too. Okay, those are approved. Mr. Reedner?
Thank you.
Our second item is Steve Vachon, Troy Road, right-of-way dedication. Mr. Bouvel. That's almost a tongue twister, right-of-way. Roy Road, right-of-way.
There's lots of, difficult last names to say in that one, too.
Indeed.
Good afternoon. I'm here to talk to you today about Steve Vachon's Troy Road right-of-way dedication at 211 Troy Road. Before I continue, is everybody familiar where that property is? Okay. ITD has a desire to add an additional lane to the eastbound leg of the Troy Road leg of the South Couplet. A couple years ago, Mr. Vachon came in wanting to discuss a development that he was planning at that address. And through that development, we worked with him and ITD to try to work some sort of an agreement out to where we could facilitate that lane expansion. Since then, Mr. Vachon has chose to sell the property and has decided not to go forward with his development. But before he sold the property, he wanted to continue with the right-of-way dedication. And so what we're doing here today is possibly accepting that right-of-way dedication before he sells the property. The packet you got should include an exhibit of the right-of-way, which is, it varies in width, but it's approximately 15 feet wide along the entire frontage of his property, and is just long enough to add that additional lane to the highway. It's pretty straightforward. I can't think of anything else I need to point out.
I do have a question for you.
I would love to answer your question.
Okay. So I'm seeing the map. Tell me landmark-wise, how far the length is along Highway 8?
We're looking at approximately about 400 feet of that frontage.
From the intersection all the way to the end of the property, isn't that right, Bob?
Yes.
Right up against electrical specialist?
Yep.
Just right before that.
Yes, it would go.
Okay.
It would stop just short of electrical specialist.
Okay.
Yep.
For council's edification, Idaho code requires that before a city or a district accepts property, it has to be formally accepted by the council or the governing body. So that's why it's here before you today. There are plans to widen the roadway. The plan is that the city will participate as well as ITD when that happens. So this is a necessary first step. It's a good deal because Mr. Vachon is going to sell the property. It's best to get that in the public's possession so then we can move forward with improvements when the time comes.
Ready?
So I'm curious, is Mr. Vachon's interest just to facilitate the additional lane and just being generous? Or I'm curious about his interest.
This is a very generous, yes,
Okay.
dedication by Mr. Vachon. Originally, ITD, it was going to be a requirement for his development. It was going to add an additional lane to facilitate right-hand turn movements into his property. That having the second lane would prevent rear-end collisions of people coming out of the intersection into the back end of somebody wanting to turn into his property. Since he's changed his mind on that, some things have changed since that development was originally proposed to make it where it might not necessarily be required. But Mr. Vachon is being very generous and is moving forward with this dedication anyways.
Sandra, do you have any questions? I don't. Okay, I guess I see no reason to do anything but accept or recommend an acceptance. What do you think?
I agree, with gratitude for
Yes,
thinking about the
definitely.
safety there after he sold the property and what might happen.
Okay, is that-
Recommend consent agenda?
Yes, sir,
Thank
please.
you.
Thank you, Bob. I appreciate it. Our third item is the Moscow Citywide Sidewalk Replacement Project Fiscal Year 2020 bid results and contract award. Could we get any more of a title?
I was just gonna say, I tried, but I couldn't fit any more words in that title, so.
Nate Sewer, tell us the story.
So for the past few years, we've done a sidewalk program, which essentially encapsulates a lot of the city needs as far as sidewalk, pedestrian ramps, curb, that sort of thing, and helps try to include that and make an offer to local homeowners who also may need sidewalk repairs done, but may struggle to secure a contractor. So this has worked, it worked extremely well in the first few years when projects were a little more scarce and contractors were more willing to lower their prices and make accommodations for some of these smaller homeowner jobs. In the last couple of years, we've had a little bit more difficulty. We've had some declining interest, and so we've tried to make a few modifications to the program, one of which you'll see here this year was rather than offering a variable bid contract, which requires the contractor to try to estimate and see the types of, or try to basically make an educated guess at the types of projects that will come their way, and it caused fluctuating prices. So this time, instead, we fixed the entrance date for homeowners and had a set number of contracts and basically asked them to put a price to each of them. And this allowed as additional alternatives. And this allowed the homeowners to look at each of the prices and say, can I afford that? Does that seem a fair price to me, or should I elect not to do the work this year? So we did that. And the other change that we did this year is we bid in the fall rather than trying to bid during the height of construction season. So with the goal of accommodating some slower schedules and hoping for better pricing that way. And that was a success. We did see very good pricing as a result of this kind of shoulder of the construction season bidding. So our engineer's estimate for all of the work, including additional alternatives A through D, was $60,500. And we received a low bid from McCall's Classic Construction for $58,000 and a little bit. So what we did after that is we then contacted the property owners, and two of the property owners chose not to participate at the prices that were offered, leading us to where we are now. Recommending the rejection of alternatives B and D and the acceptance of alternatives A and C. So we had good success with the pricing, moderate success with property owner participation. So that'll be something that we'll continue to work on in the future with this project. But for today, we would ask that you allow us to accept the contract.
Any questions? Brandy?
I do.
Yeah.
Thank you. Nate, when are if this is done annually, when are citizen requests due? Like for the next cycle, for example?
Previously, we allowed citizen requests to come in and we added them to the program as they came in. With this process, we're looking at either capping them out in the fall of the previous year or the spring of that year, and that would depend on if we chose to bid in the spring or the fall, if that makes sense, correspondingly. So we don't have 100% of a date set, but the idea is to cap them in the spring and then put this bid out in the fall about this time.
Okay, so there would be, you're anticipating in the spring another opportunity for people to request.
Absolutely.
And-
Yep.
And then, so the benefit with this to the homeowner is if they choose to participate, is it that their cost would be lower just because the city gets more favorable pricing as part of a larger project, or?
It's something, it's partly the bulk aspect of the bidding. So typically, as the numbers increase, the unit cost goes down a little bit. There's that advantage. The other advantage is the city provides all the administration. So they ensure that removals are done to city code, that traffic control is installed, that the installation, the concrete that's replaced meets all of our standards. So it's both a slightly lower price, and it also has a benefit from our taking over of the administration.
And so then those administrative costs, I guess you could say, are what is built into the budget for this program? Because I know we have money allocated to this program, or has that changed?
The administrative costs are, like, we don't factor in or take any additional administrative costs on top of what the homeowners contribute. That's staff time for this project. The budgeted dollars go into the construction portion of it. So that would be the city-funded side. So that's where we get kind of the volume. And then the homeowners, based on the pricing that the contractors provide, basically reimburse the city for their portion of the construction.
Okay.
You know, when the sidewalk, if I may, when the sidewalk program was first conceived, the idea was to make it easy on the homeowners, since they are responsible by ordinance for sidewalk adjacent to their property. So the idea was to try and give them as much advantage as we could without the public coming in and paying for the actual concrete. So again, the volume that Nate talked about, but all the staff time that goes into administering the program, making sure that all of the concrete meets spec, all of that sort of thing, inspection, all of that, the city is paying staff for. We don't try to recoup those costs. So we try to make it as easy as possible on the homeowner.
So if an individual just went directly to these companies and said, how much would it cost to fix this, would we expect that the quotes they get would be greater than what they are in the document you've given us, or we don't know?
It makes it a very small project.
Right.
So you're going to, as Nate said, you make up some amount on volume. If they can come in, take a crew for a week and do these projects, then they can give us a better price than if it's, well, this is going to take about 4 hours, so we got to go up and back and all that sort of thing. So.
And additionally to the pricing, in this current climate, we've had a lot of homeowners say that they struggle to even get a call back from contractors for some of those smaller projects.
So that was, I was, in looking at some of the two ad alternates that decided not to participate, I was wondering, is it worth it for them to try, because there was some, is particularly in one of them, quite a variation in cost. Is it even worth their time to try directly contacting them?
Some of them have,
Okay.
and sometimes we encourage, if they choose not to participate in the program, we encourage them to, have a list of contractors that they can reach out to individually. But that is kind of the struggle of this project has, or this program has, is that smaller projects are hard to, if you have a single square or a couple of squares of sidewalk to be replaced, it's hard to get a contractor to come out for something like that. So. Any further questions?
I have one more question.
Yeah.
So, maybe more just sort of something to think about for later. In these cases where that one citizen one was somewhere around $3,000, I imagine that's because it needed significant repair, which means it's a particularly problematic stretch of sidewalk. I'm just making that assumption. So at some point, what do we
What does the city do?
Yeah, if the sidewalk's in the worst shape, people can't afford to fix them.
The city has the ability to encourage the homeowner to fix it. The city has the ability to go and repair it itself and then bill the homeowner. There are various ways to do it. The code says they are responsible for it, so you have those penalties as well. We try not to get that, which is one of the reasons council implemented the sidewalk program. If something gets bad enough that there needs to be some enforcement or it's a public safety hazard rather than an inconvenience, then we have to drop back, think about how to address that, and go that way.
Okay, maybe a topic for continued problem solving.
What do you want to do? Shall we recommend acceptance of the staff's recommendation?
I would say yes.
Okay. Can we put this on consent, sir?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So we want to recommend A and C and reject B and D
Yep,
to McCall's, okay.
as written up in the action.
Please and
As
thank
written
you.
up in yeah. Thank you for
Thank
that,
you.
Nate, I appreciate it.
Yep, and I'll be sticking up here, so.
So our fourth item that causes you to stand there and wait for the next item is Third Street LHSIP utility waivers. Nate, hit it.
So this is a project, the Local Highway Safety Improvement Program is what that acronym stands for. And this is a grant project that Lisa and I had great success with over the past years. This project is actually the culmination of 3 successful grants, Phase 1 and 2 on 3rd Street and the project on 6th Street, that will all be focused on pedestrian access, intersection illumination, just providing additional pedestrian safety in these relatively highly traveled corridors. So this is just kind of a very brief subset of it. In order to authorize the construction, we have to provide an opportunity for the local franchise utility companies to object to essentially the extensive construction and the amount of work that they will have to do to move their utilities from within the public right-of-way. And it is not a public hearing, it is a public meeting. I've been using public hearing incorrectly on some of this language, so if it says public hearing in your document, ignore that. But it essentially would, at council, provide an opportunity for those utility companies to object. So that is what the proposed action is to approve holding that public meeting at the next council.
Again, if I may interject, the way that this is set up, it's set up by ITD as part of their regulations. Obviously meant for a much bigger project than the ones we're talking about. So it's required under Idaho code that an opportunity for these utilities be given to review the plans and to provide some feedback, or to waive it. If they're fine with the way they are, they can execute a waiver. And the code says specifically, if you execute the waiver, no need to have the utility hearing. However, if you look in your packet, Precision Engineering, the engineering firm on the project, has sent out requests for execution of waivers to the 3 franchised utilities. None of them executed them, which is typically what happens. Folks really want to have that opportunity, but they're not going to say, well, I'll just waive my rights under this. So the Monday night hearing, as Nate indicated, is a utility hearing, not a public hearing. So the only people who need to know about it technically are the franchise utilities. They all know about it because they had direct mailings. Once this is held, if testimony is given, then the engineers will take it back, consider it, and integrate it or do something with it. If there is no testimony taken, then the project can proceed and Nate and his folks can move forward. So it's just one of those hurdles that ITD regulations require us to do.
Thank you, Gary. So, are there any questions on the process project?
My main question was if this was something unusual, but it sounds like this,
Sounds like
it's
it
not,
happens all the time.
for the utility companies to not sign.
Yeah, that's not unusual, and typically, the way the code's written, it is for ITD to do, but essentially said he's going to do it on their behalf, and it saves the utilities having to go to a ITD board meeting. So it's more convenient for us, we've got a little bit more flexibility.
Okay, well, let's do that. Let's approve holding the utility waiver public meeting, not hearing.
Yep, and that will be, yeah, if we could just delete public out of the action, and that will have to be on the regular agenda, ma'am.
Okay, so we're going to do that on October 5th.
Okay?
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nate. I appreciate it. Okay, our last item, other than a cool report coming up, is the authorization for the purchase of mask fitting machine I would say that's probably a CBA mask. Hey, Chief Nickerson?
It is, thank you very much. Basically, we'd like to be able to move forward with purchasing of a mask fit testing machine, and what does that mean? It means two things. The machine includes a computer, an actual device that actually measures how your masks fit to your face. This includes SCBA masks, which we several years ago bought 40 of them and replaced all of them. So we need a mask fit testing machine to test those. In addition, the benefit is we can also test for N95 masks, which is used every day on all of our calls these days. So really, it's a dual purpose type machine to be able to utilize the CARES funds and so forth if possible. But it's so beneficial because right now we have to actually schedule a mask fit test machine from a vendor. It only does our SCBA masks. And right now we have to do our N95 mask, what's called manually. You actually put a bag over your head, you do a taste test, Brandy knows. You see if you taste something, and then it works. Don't get me wrong. However, the benefit is we can probably move through a little bit quicker, and it's a dual purpose. Really, that's the benefit of the whole thing. And it doesn't. We don't have to schedule it with a vendor because we got folks coming and going regularly with just the way our organization functions and operates. With residents coming in, new volunteers coming in. Right now we have 10 new volunteers getting ready to come on. So that's a benefit that we could, kind of move through a little quicker rather than saying, hey, can we get that in January or February or whatever? It's just kind of really hard. So this would be in-house. Our training, Captain Williams, will be trained on it along with a couple others to be able to utilize that in-house. But the other benefit is not only will it benefit the fire department, but it'll benefit Public Works, it'll benefit the police department, also the outlying agencies in Latah County as well for not only the N95 mask, but their SCBA mask. And then when I talked to Gary about it previously, as long as we can get them to purchase the adapter, as they call it, then we can utilize that to go out and test their folks as well and be compliant with how masks fit actually, both N95 and the SCBA masks. So it's really a big deal. We're required to do it every year. So it's just a time-consuming thing a little bit, but this would help us spread that out over a period of time as well. So if you have any other questions or anything.
Brandy?
So,
Yes, Brandy.
so from what so it's pretty easily portable to different
It is
locations?
portable. Yep. Mm-hmm. It
Okay.
is. Yep.
And where you were renting a machine before that did
Wasn't-
not fit for the N95s, where was, that was coming in from?
Coming from
somewhere?
California, Washington, Oregon, wherever, just from a vendor that we utilize who we bought our equipment from. We didn't rent it. It was borrowed, literally. It
Oh,
was on
okay.
loan, if you will. Because that's what they did was, we purchased $200 and something thousand worth of SCBA's. So that's just a benefit provided by them to all the outlying departments and stuff, if they don't have their own. There are folks out there that do have their own. But that is an opportunity that they provide for folks that maybe can't afford it. And this is a good opportunity with the CARES funds and so forth to be able to get our own. We have enough people, and we have enough people coming and going to where we could actually probably borrow that thing probably about 3 to 4 months out of the year at least, if not more. So just by the way our attrition is and coming and going. So then add into the outlying agencies, not only in the county, but the police department and the Public Works and all the masks they use as well. So.
Mr. Reedner?
We'll be looking at this, as the chief indicated, we looked at it for the ability to use CARES Act funding for that.
Yeah.
There is a process by which we may be able to get pre-authorization for that, so we will move through. This is not a budgeted item. This is one that came up in July. So rather than try and open up the budget, put it in the open budget process for the FY20 budget. We decided to bring it forward in the FY21. We weren't sure about a lot of things with it, as well as the ability for us to be able to use CARES Act funding. So that's why it was not included in the original budget. Fire departments wanted one of these for several years. And as you can see, we have SCBA needs in some of our public works applications as well. So we will see what we can do to get that through the CARES Act funding. If that is, we are unable to do that, then we will come back before council and determine whether or not we can fit this in otherwise. It makes a ton of sense right now, specifically with the N95 masks, because even the one they were borrowing, the inconvenience of being able to fit and test only once, maybe twice a year.
Yeah.
N95 masks are, they're ubiquitous now. The ambulance people use them, the fire people use them, so really need to try and protect the safety of our volunteers as well.
Are you talking about the CARES fund from that first chunk?
Yes.
Or the second?
The first population-based allocation,
Right.
$887,100. Right now, we've got a couple of things that we're still working on to request reimbursement for. This would be one of them, as well as the additional computer equipment to allow people to work remotely.
Okay.
So those are our big purchases thus far. There are other sundry sanitation things and those sorts of things, but yeah, that's the first allocation.
Go ahead.
So then, am I understanding correctly that you would not proceed with actually purchasing it until you know if you have the CARES funding, and if you don't have the CARES funding, then it comes back and we have another discussion
Exactly.
before it's purchased?
You bet.
Okay.
And it's just a matter at that point to see whether we can afford it or not. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
and we'll come back with a recommendation in the case that we can't use CARES funds for it.
All right. Sandra, no question?
That was my question.
Okay, so are we in agreement of approval of the purchase with the CARES Act caveat? So, purchase of the Quality Guard mask fit testing machine and seek reimbursement through the City CARES Act allocation.
Yeah,
Okay.
the wording of that is not exactly what I think we just talked about, because it just says approval of the purchase of it, and like then seeking reimbursement, but I think what we agreed on is approval of purchasing it if we have approval for CARES Act funding, is that?
However you want to word it, I mean, we understand what you want us to do.
Okay, as long as that's clear, that contingency at this
Yeah,
stage,
it's almost flipped
right?
in priority, but we appreciate you, Chief Nickerson, thank you for bringing that up to us.
Yep.
Have you memorized the rainbow passage yet? That's, okay.
All right, that was our last item on the agenda. There is, however, a report from the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. And look, Jen's on the screen. Hello, Jen.
Hello, all. Yes, I'm zooming from upstairs as I monitor our social media as the meeting goes on. So the Families First Coronavirus Response Act is a requirement for organizations to provide two types of emergency leave. So we have the Emergency Paid Sick Leave Act and the Emergency Family and Medical Leave Expansion Act, which are two pieces that go with the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. So what these provisions allow us to do or require us to do is we are required to provide 2 weeks or up to 80 hours of paid sick leave at the employee's regular rate of pay when an employee is unable to work because of COVID-related items. Then the second requirement is 2 weeks or up to 80 hours of paid sick leave at 2/3 of the employee's regular rate of pay because they are taking care of an individual, immediate family member, care for a child, those types of things. And so we give them up to 2 weeks at 2/3 of rate of their pay for that. And then up to an additional 10 weeks of paid expanded family and medical leave, again, at 2/3 of the employee's regular rate of pay, where an employee is unable to work due to a bona fide need to take leave to care for a child. And that is in instances where either the school or their child care provider is closed and unavailable for reasons related to COVID-19. Now, one of the pieces that we have in place for all of these is the telecommuting arrangements that we brought to council just a couple of weeks ago. In any instance where we can find a telecommuting arrangement, that is the preferred method, both under Families First and for the city of Moscow, in allowing those employees to continue to do their work, but also to take care of their family, or to be able to not use sick leave, to use those up to 2 weeks of leave for another COVID emergency. For instance, if we've have employees that are quarantining, this happened early on due to international travel or quarantining because of a potential exposure, they're still able to work from home. But say a month from now they do get COVID and aren't able to work from home because they're ill, well, they would have the opportunity to take those 2 weeks at that time. So the telecommuting has really been key in keeping the wheels on in a couple of different ways, and also just providing more flexibility for employees to take care of themselves, take care of their families, and still get work done. So with that, we did put together a policy to guide us through this with, we went with an application type form that seemed to be what other folks were doing. So if folks felt like they had a COVID need that fell into one of these categories, they could jot down their information, because there is certain information that's required, especially with the 10 weeks of the expanded family and medical leave for childcare or school being unavailable. So they can provide that information. We have it all in one piece. And then also looking at what that could look like was as related to the CARES reimbursement as well. And what we have an opportunity to do there. So we'll have all of that together. So if there's a reimbursement opportunity, we can have the paperwork ready to go for that as well. So just an update on this required program that we do have to provide for our employees, and seems to work pretty well given some of the other things we put into place. And just wanted to let the committee know and the council know that we're moving forward and getting those details ironed out.
Again, if I may.
Please.
As Jen indicated, this is a requirement of the federal government, so the policies that she is talking about are just those to administer the program. So otherwise, if it was a personnel policy, we'd be bringing that to council for approval.
Yep.
So this is just compliance, same thing as FLSA, minimum wage, that sort of thing. So that's why it's coming to you as a report.
Excellent. Good question?
So when coming up with what the program would look like, how did you start? How did you?
So we went straight to the source for it's the Department of Labor that shares the frequently asked questions, the guidelines for what Families First, and then the Emergency Paid Sick Leave Act and the Emergency Family and Medical Leave Expansion Act. We just went straight by what the guidelines and the requirements are for those programs and have adopted them wholesale. There's not much room for flexibility in those approaches. So we're simply following the federal guidelines.
Okay. Sandra, anything? Okay, thank you, Jen. Appreciate the report on that. Okay, shall we adjourn?
Yes.
Okay, we're adjourned.
Why not?